You may be seated. Good morning. After a lot of discussion and argument and back and forth, the decision was made in 1995 to reintroduce wolves to Yellowstone National Park. The last wolf had been in Yellowstone in 1924, so 7 decades without wolves. And so on one day in 1995, they brought the cages with some wolves and they opened them up, and a few wolves wandered off into Yellowstone. And I'm sure it was a feel-good story then. I mean, how can that not be a feel-good story? It feels like kind of the right thing to do and the ecological thing to do and the thing that you want to do as a good conservator, and maybe even the green thing to do. I'm sure we didn't use those terms in 1995, but we might have. But the effects on Yellowstone of returning those wolves to the wild would far exceed everyone's wildest imagination. It was nothing short of amazing. So with no wolves there for 7 decades, the elk population just exploded. Thousands upon thousands upon thousands of elk stomping around on the ground, breaking it up with their hooves. And without a predator, not only did the elk population explode, but the elk didn't have to go anywhere. They weren't being chased anywhere. They could just stay right where they were at, hang out around the water sources, the rivers and the streams, and just stay there and eat and drink and hang out. And they did. And they ate everything. They ate all of the grass, and they ate all of the bushes and the shrubs and the small trees, and their hooves tromped down on the root systems of the larger trees, killing them off. And until there were large swaths of Yellowstone that were just brown. So when the wolves returned, they started picking off some of the elk. They started their work of bringing the elk population under control, but more importantly, they got the elk moving, running around, not just hanging out in one spot, and particularly not in the wide open spots where the waters were. And the effects were almost immediate. The grass came back. And then eventually the bushes and the shrubs came back, and then the trees started coming back. In the few years after the wolves' return, the number and size of the trees around the waterways quintupled. Cottonwoods, aspen, willow trees started to thrive. Who knew? But willow trees are really important for beaver. In the harsh winters of Yellowstone, where the snow was feet and feet and feet deep, their really only source of food was the bark of the willow tree. I asked that the temperature in here be brought low this morning to kind of put us in the mood of a Yellowstone winter. So we're going multi-sensory this morning. So just bear with it. Without the wolves and without the willow trees, the beavers left. With the wolves' return and the return of the willow trees, the beavers returned. And the beavers did what beavers do, and beavers started building dams, which slowed the flow of the water. It allowed water to seep deep into the water table. It allowed pools to be formed around their dams where fish could grow and thrive and spawn, and the otters returned, and birds of prey returned to feast on the fish in those pools of water. With the wolves feeding on some of the elk, there was carrion in the park for the first time in decades. I mean, real honest-to-God carrion, which allowed species of scavenger animals to return to feast on the carrion. And so foxes increased, and wolverines and vultures. With the wolves' return, they also brought the population of coyotes under control, which allowed the population of small, little, tiny, furry creatures to rebound, which then served as food supply for other animals who fed on them, like fox and wolverine and birds of prey. With all of the shrubs and all of the bushes, there were berries, and so species of birds that hadn't been seen in Yellowstone in decades returned to Yellowstone again. All of this is amazing. It's amazing to me. Scientists call this a trophic cascade. By affecting the very top of the food chain, they affected the entire living ecosystem underneath of it. Every species was brought into balance underneath. And the return of the wolves changed the landscape. It changed the course of the flow of rivers and streams, because no longer were there all these thousands and thousands of elk stomping around the waterways, breaking down the sides of the streams and the rivers. There were now grasses with roots and trees with roots that held the sides of the rivers and streams together. There were those beavers with their dams creating their pools, and the rivers and streams started to meander again. I mean, who would have thought? Who would have said, we need more wolverines around here. What should we do? Oh, return the wolves. Oh, we need more beavers around here. What do we do? Oh, bring back the wolves. Oh, we'd like the stream to meander a little more. What should we do? Oh, bring back the wolves. I love science. I love nature. And I love the intricacy of it all. The beauty of it all, the intricacy of the eye, which allows for the miracle of sight, the intricacy of the heart and the circulatory system, the intricacy of a molecule, the intricacy of a solar system or a galaxy, the intricacy of an ecosystem like Yellowstone, or the ecosystem right here around St. David's. It's amazing to me because in it I can see the hand and the fingerprints of a creator. But here's one of the other things that's amazing to me about the story of Yellowstone, and which does tie in with the gospel lesson. Yes, I'm going to get there in a second. How many wolves do you think it would take to bring beavers back? How many wolves do you think it takes to change the course of rivers and streams? Are we talking a couple thousand wolves? Are we talking 5,000 wolves? Are we talking 10,000 wolves? So they, this past January, they did a census of the wolves, and the wolf population is today up to now 124 wolves. In 2.2 million acres of Yellowstone National Park, 2,500 square miles, 124 wolves changed the landscape. 124 wolves we could put easily and comfortably right in this room. We won't. Although I think they'd be comfortable in here this morning. They'd be fine, but we would be very uncomfortable with their presence, and so we won't do that. But like this number of wolves could change everything. To me, it's a reminder that everything matters. The smallest things matter. You and I matter Paul will say in Galatians and 1 Corinthians, a little yeast will leaven the whole batch. Like you just need a little bit, and the effects are amazing. Jesus will say, the kingdom of God is like a mustard seed, the smallest of the seeds, but if you plant it, it grows into the greatest of shrubs. Like with God with us, it just takes a little bit for the most amazing thing to happen, and each of us matter, and each of us are connected. In this morning's gospel lesson, we hear Jesus say one of the harshest things in the Gospels. He says, if anyone causes one of these little ones to stumble, it would be better for them. It would be better for them. The better option would be if we tied a millstone around their neck and we threw it into the sea. It would be better for them if one causes one of the little ones to stumble. The little ones? I mean, do the little ones really matter? Isn't it the important ones who really matter? The movers and shakers, the people who make things happen day after day and week after week, aren't they the ones that we should really be caring about? And yet Jesus is standing there like a big brother, standing in front of these little ones like, do not mess with them. Because they matter. If I started walking around here telling of who I thought needed to have millstones tied around their necks, people would start saying, this new rector, we wish he was more Christian, right? Like, it's not very Christian of the new rector, and yet Christ says these words. Such do the little ones matter. Who are the little ones? Well, we're probably talking about children here, the little ones. Jesus has a thing for children. Let the little children come to me. There's a couple times people do bring children to Jesus, and the disciples get all in a tizzy, like, get these children out of here. We got this important person. We got the Savior of the universe. We got the Messiah here. We don't need these children with their snotty noses messing everything up. Get them out of here. And Jesus is like, oh, no. If anyone wants to know how to get into the kingdom of heaven, you get in like one of them. We need them around to show us the way. They matter. Everyone matters. Jesus is probably also talking about the vulnerable in society, the people who by their life circumstance or by society's circumstance are struggling, or the people who are brand new in their faith, and so maybe they are struggling with their faith. Jesus is like, you don't mess with them. They matter. Just because they're hurting, just because they're new, they matter. We are not in stewardship season yet, and this is not a stewardship sermon, so please don't glaze over. Please, stay with me, I promise. But it's coming. And we might start talking about everyone mattering, and everyone's gift mattering, and everyone's contribution mattering. We might recall the story of Jesus standing there when the woman put in her 2 small copper coins into the temple's treasury. After watching everyone put in their large checks and their stock options into the temple treasury, and Jesus says that woman with her 2 coins has given more than everyone else. She matters. And her gift matters. Her contribution matters. We might remember that time that Jesus was teaching to a whole bunch of people, and he was given a long sermon, and people started getting hungry, and there wasn't enough food around. And so, but there was a boy, and he had a couple fish and a couple loaves of bread, and the disciples say, but what is that among so many people? And yet Jesus could take that little boy's offering and feed everyone there, because he and his contribution mattered. There are two basic messages I want to get across here this morning, and the two messages are going to speak to two different audiences, I think. You might be coming to church today struggling as to whether you really matter. Whatever's going on in your home, in your family, in your friend group, at work, at the office, or at school, you might be wondering, do you matter? Does anyone really care about you? Does anyone listen to you? You might be one of the millions and millions of people in this country who are struggling with loneliness and depression and anxiety, wondering if all of this matters. I've only been here for a month, so I don't know all of you yet. Maybe you all are just totally confident. I don't know. Maybe you're like, I got this. Life, I got it. But my guess is there's a few of us here. Maybe we're having a bad day. It's still kind of early. Maybe we had a bad week or a bad month, or maybe it's been a heck of a decade. And you're wondering if you matter. And the one thing I want you to know as you walk out these doors this morning is that you do matter. And if you matter to no one else, and I'm sure you do, but if you do matter to no one else, you matter to the creator of the universe. As you come up here a bit later and feast at God's table, I want you to know in your bones that you matter to Jesus, a Jesus who wants to give you his very body and his very blood to you, for you. You matter. Now, maybe that's not you today. Maybe you do come in feeling kind of good. You're having a good day. You had a good week. The last decade has been amazing. And so you're pretty confident in your place, and you know your value, and things are going good. I have a different message for you. What I want you going out these doors thinking about is who around you needs lifted up? Who in your orbit needs to know in their bones that they matter? Because I guarantee you they are in your orbit. They are either sitting next to you this morning, or in front of you, or behind you, or you will meet them out at Acme or Whole Foods a bit later, or when you're gathered around with family and friends around the soft, warm glow of the Eagles game a bit later this afternoon. There will be people in that crowd who are struggling as to whether they matter. And you can tell them that they matter, and I hope you do. And you can tell them that if they matter to no one, they matter to you. And you can tell them if they matter to no one else, they matter to God. That Jesus came and died and rose for them. You can tell them that. It's okay. And you can also show them. You can give them your attention and your time and your love. When I was in seminary at Emory University, Candler School of Theology, one of my professors was Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And over the next umpteen years, you're going to hear a lot of Desmond Tutu, because I have a lot of stories about Desmond Tutu. And one of my favorite stories about Desmond Tutu is that when he was in residence at Emory, one of the things that he would do is he would wear a little cap, just a little cap. And you might have needed a cap in winter in Atlanta, but you didn't need a cap in the spring or the summer or the fall in Atlanta because it was warm. But he wore a cap anyway, all 4 seasons. And the reason he wore a cap was so that when he was walking around the Emory University campus and he saw someone who was emptying out a trash can in one of the offices, or he saw someone who was adding mulch to one of the beautiful flower beds on the campus, he would have something to take off and give them just a little bit of honor. He would be able to say, "Good morning, sir," or "Good morning, ma'am." And he knew, he knew his value. He knew that, anytime he walked down the street, people stopped and stared and pointed the finger, and there's the Archbishop of Cape Town, there's a best-selling author, there's the winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, and he used that attention to give attention to the people around him who were otherwise invisible. I love that story. And I love that he had a shtick to give people honor. And his shtick doesn't need to be our shtick, but we should have a shtick. So if you don't start wearing a cap around, figure something else out. This is one of the lines that is through the scriptures from one end to the other. The great story of the Old Testament is that God heard and saw the plight of a nation of slaves who weren't even living in their own land. No one cared about the Israelite slaves. No one cared, but God cared. They mattered to him. And so he set a bush on fire, and he told a guy to go to Pharaoh and say, "Let my people go." And he split the waters so they could walk through on dry land, and he gave them a home. They mattered to him. Jesus would tell a great parable about a shepherd who had 100 sheep. 99 of them were well-behaved and manicured and right there with him, but one had gone missing, and he went out. He left the 99 to go and find the one, because that one mattered. He would tell another great story of having two sons, one very well-behaved son who stayed home and did what he was supposed to do, and the other son who took his inheritance and went off and spent it, and he came home. And instead of getting a talking to, he got a party because he mattered. Oh, if we could just let that soak into our bones that we matter. Oh, if we could just let it leak out into the world that people matter. It could change everything. It could change the course of rivers. Amen.